The neighbors heard Marcus yelling at his pregnant wife, through the rain, calling her trash, telling her she'd never be anything. They watched her fall to her knees in the mud, begging. Then they heard the engine, a sound that expensive doesn't belong in neighborhoods like this. When that Bentley door opened and that man in the $10,000 suit stepped out, Marcus's face went white. He'd just humiliated the niece of Terrence DeWitt, the billionaire who owned half the city. The thunder rolled across Atlanta's West Side neighborhood that September evening like a warning nobody wanted to hear. Inside the small brick house on Ashby Street, Denise stood frozen in the kitchen doorway, staring at the burnt pot of rice on the stove. 8 months pregnant, her belly pressed against the faded maternity dress she'd worn 3 times already that week. The smell of scorched rice mixed with the scent of rain coming through the screen door, and she just knew this was going to be bad. Marcus sat at the kitchen table in his work clothes, a half-empty bottle of whiskey next to his phone, his eyes red and dangerous. He'd been drinking more lately, ever since she'd noticed he stopped talking about his job. "I asked you to do one thing," Marcus said, his voice low and sharp like a blade. "One simple thing. Cook dinner. That's all you had to do today, Denise." She opened her mouth to apologize, to explain that her back had been killing her and the doctor said she needed more rest. But Marcus slammed his hand on the table so hard, the bottle jumped. "The baby, the baby, the baby. Everything is about this baby. What about me? What about the fact that I work all day while you sit here doing nothing?" Denise wanted to remind him about the 2 cleaning jobs she'd worked up until last month, scrubbing floors and toilets while her ankles swelled and her back screamed, saving every dollar for when the baby came. But she'd learned not to argue when he got like this. What happened next escalated so fast, Denise barely had time to process it. Marcus stood up, grabbed her clothes from the bedroom and started throwing them out the front door into the rain. Her shoes, her bathroom things, the small box with ultrasound pictures. Everything landed in puddles on the front lawn while neighbors' lights started clicking on one by one. "Please," Denise begged, grabbing his arm. "Think about the baby. Just let me stay tonight. I'll figure something out tomorrow. Please." Marcus shook her off so hard she stumbled, her hand instinctively protecting her belly from the fall she barely avoided. Then he said the words that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "You're nothing. You hear me? You're nothing. You'll always be nothing. You came from nothing. You are nothing. And you're going to die as nothing." Across the street, Mrs. Washington called out from her porch, telling Denise to come over, but Denise couldn't move. She walked out into that storm like a woman already drowning, sank to her knees in the mud, and let the rain mix with her tears while gathering her ruined belongings. Behind her, Marcus slammed the door and locked it. The baby kicked inside her as if asking what was happening, why everything felt so wrong. What Marcus didn't know, what Denise had kept hidden for 3 years, was that she'd been lying about having no family. 3 years earlier, before she'd even met Marcus, Denise had been working as a server at a charity gala at the Ritz-Carlton. She'd dropped a fork while refilling water glasses, and when she bent down to pick it up, the older man at the table had stared at her like he'd seen a ghost. "What's your name?" he'd asked, standing up despite the confused looks from people around him. "Denise Miller, sir," she'd answered, worried she'd done something wrong. The man's hand had gone to his chest. "Your mother. What was your mother's name?" Denise had frozen. "I never knew my mother. She died when I was born." The man's eyes had filled with tears. Nicole DeWitt. That was your mother's name. I'm her brother. I'm your uncle, Terrence. I've been looking for you for 22 years. That night had changed everything. Terrence had shown her pictures of a woman who looked exactly like Denise, told her about a mother who'd loved architecture and dreamed of designing buildings that would last forever. He'd told her about a trust fund, $50 million her mother had left her, but Denise had been 22 and terrified. The word family had scared her more than being alone, because family meant people who could hurt you, people who could leave. So she'd run. Changed her number, moved across town, and 2 weeks later, met Marcus at a coffee shop. Simple, normal Marcus who'd seemed safe. Compared to billionaire uncles and inheritance money she didn't think she deserved. Now, kneeling in the mud outside Marcus's house, Denise's phone buzzed in her soaked pocket. The screen was cracked but still working, showing a text from an unknown number. "I've been watching. I'm here." Before she could process those words, she heard it, the engine, deep and powerful, purring like something that cost more than every car on the block combined. The headlights cut through the rain, bright and white and impossible. A midnight black Bentley Mulsanne pulled up to the curb, and the whole neighborhood went silent like the world was holding its breath. Mrs. Washington stood on her porch with her hand over her mouth. Mr. Johnson came outside, despite the rain, staring. The teenagers who'd been sitting in a car down the street got out with their phones already recording because they knew they were witnessing something that would break the internet. The Bentley's back door opened and Terence DeWitt stepped out. Tall, distinguished, dark skin glowing even in the rain, salt and pepper hair cut with precision, wearing a suit that probably cost what Denise used to make in 6 months. His driver rushed around with an umbrella, but Terence wasn't looking at his shoes or worrying about his clothes getting wet. He was looking directly at Denise, kneeling in that mud, and his expression was breaking with every step he took toward her. "Niece?" Terence said, his voice carrying across the yard with the weight of 3 years of searching. "I've been looking for you for 3 years." Inside the house, Marcus must have been watching through the window, because suddenly he was opening the front door, stepping onto the porch with confusion turning to panic on his face. "What the hell is going on? Who are you?" But Terence ignored him completely. He walked straight through the rain, letting his $1,000 shoes sink into the mud, letting his perfect suit get soaked, and knelt down beside Denise like she was the only person in the world who mattered. "I'm so sorry," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I should have found you sooner. I should have protected you." Denise whispered, "Uncle Terence," and saying it out loud made everything real in a way she wasn't prepared for. Marcus's voice cracked when he repeated, "Niece? Denise, what is he talking about? You said you didn't have any family." That's when Terence finally turned to look at Marcus, and the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. His voice was quiet, but carried a weight that made Marcus step back. "What did you just say to my niece?" Behind Terence, a second vehicle had pulled up, a black Mercedes SUV with 3 men in suits, stepping out, and they definitely weren't smiling. Mrs. Washington found her voice loud and clear. "Lord have mercy. That's the man from the news. That's Terence DeWitt, the tech billionaire. He owns half of Atlanta." The color drained from Marcus's face in seconds, going from angry red to ash, white as the reality of his situation crashed down on him. "Mr. DeWitt, look, this is a misunderstanding. Denise and we had a fight, but married couples fight, and I didn't know she was your—" Terence cut him off with that same terrifyingly calm voice. "She told you she had no family, and you believed that gave you permission to treat her like she was disposable, like she was nothing." That word, nothing, hung in the air like an accusation. Marcus had screamed it at Denise 5 minutes ago, and now it was being quoted back to him by a man who could buy and sell Marcus's entire life without noticing the expense. Terence helped Denise up as carefully as if she were made of glass, while one of his security team brought over a cashmere blanket and wrapped it around her shoulders. "I'm sorry I ran," Denise said through her tears. 3 years ago, I'm sorry I was scared." Terence's expression softened. "We have time for all of that. Right now we need to get you somewhere warm and dry." He looked back at Marcus. Do you have any of my niece's belongings that aren't currently in the mud? Marcus stammered. This is my house. She can't just... One of Terrence's security team stepped forward. Sir, we can retrieve Mrs. Miller's belongings now, or we can come back with the police and a court order in approximately 45 minutes. Which would you prefer? Marcus looked at the men, at the cars, at the neighbors now filling their yards and porches, at his phone blowing up with notifications because half the block was live streaming this moment that would destroy his reputation forever. Fine, he muttered. Take whatever. As Terrence guided Denise toward the Bentley, she looked back once at the house where she'd spent 3 years feeling like a prisoner. Marcus stood on the porch looking small and powerless and scared, which was exactly how he'd made her feel every single day of their marriage. The Bentley's interior was warm and quiet, the rain just a gentle sound against bulletproof glass. Terrence sat beside her, holding her hand, not saying anything, just being there the way family should be. How did you find me? Denise finally asked. Terrence's answer revealed a truth that changed everything. I never stopped looking. 6 months ago, one of my investigators found a marriage license. Denise Miller married to Marcus Thompson. I wanted to reach out immediately, but my security chief convinced me to wait, to observe, to make sure you were happy and safe before I disrupted your life. He'd been watching. The house across the street, Mrs. Washington's house, had security equipment that Terrence had installed after explaining who he was and why he needed help. He'd been watching over Denise for months, hoping he wouldn't need to intervene, but ready the moment he did. I saw enough to know my niece was in danger, he said. So I came. Through the rain-streaked window, Denise watched her old life get smaller. The house, the neighborhood, Marcus still standing on that porch looking lost. She'd thought she was nothing, but it turned out she'd been everything all along. She just needed someone to remind her. The mansion in Buckhead looked like something out of a dream. 3 stories of pale stone and glass, lit up like a palace with gardens stretching out on either side. Inside was even more overwhelming. Marble floors, artwork that belonged in museums, a double staircase curving up to the 2nd floor. But it wasn't cold or sterile. Family photos covered every wall, and there on the mantel was a silver-framed picture of her mother, Nicole, young and smiling, holding a baby. That's you, Terrence said softly. The only picture I have of you together. The hospital took it the day you were born, before she... He stopped, cleared his throat. You have her smile. The guest suite was bigger than the entire house Denise had shared with Marcus. A bedroom with a California king, a sitting room with a fireplace, a bathroom with a tub that could fit 3 people, windows overlooking gardens and the glittering Atlanta skyline. Dr. Lamont Hughes arrived exactly on time, a distinguished man in his 60s who examined Denise thoroughly while Terrence waited outside. Your blood pressure is elevated, which is understandable, Dr. Hughes said, making notes on his tablet. The baby's heartbeat is strong and steady, but I'm worried about you, Denise. This level of stress isn't good for either of you. He looked at her seriously. Tonight wasn't the first time your husband hurt you, was it? Denise's throat tightened. He never hit me. Dr. Hughes's expression showed he understood. Physical abuse isn't the only kind that matters. What came next was harder to hear than Denise expected. While she'd been with the doctor, Terrence's security team had been at Marcus's house retrieving her belongings, and they'd found things. Credit cards in her name that she didn't know about, bank statements showing purchases she'd never made, accounts that had been systematically emptied. Marcus has been stealing from you for at least 2 years, Terrence explained gently. Right now it looks like approximately $67,000. The number hit Denise like a physical blow. $67,000. Every penny she'd saved from her cleaning jobs, every tip and extra shift, every dollar she'd squirreled away thinking she was building a future for herself and her baby. Marcus had shown her account statements, told her they had almost $70,000 saved. Those statements had been real, but the account was in her name only, and he'd been draining it the whole time, forging her signature on withdrawal slips, taking cash advances on credit cards he'd opened using her identity. There were also photos, Marcus with other women at bars, restaurants, hotel rooms, some dated during Denise's pregnancy, dating profiles on multiple apps, listing him as single with no children. "I want to press charges," Denise said, and Terrence nodded. "We will, and we'll make sure he never hurts you or anyone else again." While Denise tried to sleep that first night in the mansion, Marcus sat alone in his dark living room, surrounded by beer cans and the wreckage of his life. The videos had gone viral. His phone had exploded with messages, his mother crying, his father silent, his brother texting that he was a disgrace. His friends had abandoned him. Everyone had seen those videos of him throwing a pregnant woman into the rain, seen a billionaire call him out in front of the whole neighborhood. Monday morning, Marcus tried to go to work, but his boss was waiting with bad news. The company has an image to maintain, and with these videos going viral, having you on staff sends the wrong message. Marcus tried to argue, but his boss cut him off. "You resigned 4 months ago, Marcus, after that incident with the receptionist. You've been coming in every day pretending to work, but that's trespassing. Security has been instructed to remove you if you return." So that lie was exposed too. Marcus hadn't had a job in 4 months, hadn't told Denise, had been spending his days at bars and his friend's apartment while she thought he was working. The money he'd stolen from her accounts was gone, spent on car payments, bar tabs, and an online poker habit that had spiraled out of control. His landlord called that evening. "Marcus, we need to talk about the rent. You've been saying you'll have it next week for 3 months now, and I've got people calling asking if I know I'm renting to that guy from the video. You have 30 days to vacate." Marcus sat in the dark and faced the truth. No job, no money, about to be evicted, facing criminal charges, a restraining order preventing him from contacting his wife. He'd called Denise nothing, but he was the one who had nothing left. 3 weeks later, Denise sat in attorney Bernard Crawford's office, 9 months pregnant and preparing for the civil trial that would determine everything. "Marcus's attorney is going to try to paint you as a gold digger," Bernard explained. He was a brilliant lawyer in his 50s with wire-rimmed glasses and the steady confidence of someone who'd won a lot of cases. "He'll say you seduced Marcus, got pregnant to trap him, only remembered your rich uncle when you saw an opportunity." Denise shook her head. "I didn't even know I was pregnant when I ran from Uncle Terrence 3 years ago." Bernard smiled. "We have evidence of that. Medical records, timeline, everything. His attorney will still try because it's literally all he has. What you need to do is tell the truth, stay calm, and don't let him rattle you." The night before trial, the whole family gathered for dinner. Terrence, his wife Veronica, who'd flown back from Paris, their son Cameron, who'd driven home from Howard University, aunts and uncles and cousins Denise was still learning to know, and her grandmother Rose, who was 83, and had cried for an hour when she'd finally met the granddaughter she thought she'd lost forever. "I wish Nicole could see you," Grandma Rose said, holding Denise's hand. "You're everything she dreamed you'd be." That night, Denise made a decision. When this was over, she'd use her inheritance to help other women trapped in situations like hers. Shelters, legal aid, education programs, whatever it took to make sure no one else felt as alone as she had. The Fulton County Courthouse was packed when Denise arrived with her family, cameras and reporters shouting questions as Bernard led them through the crowd. Inside the courtroom, Denise saw Marcus for the first time in 3 weeks. He looked terrible, thinner, unshaven, wearing a suit that didn't fit right, his public defender looking overwhelmed. When Marcus's eyes met Denise's, something flickered across his face. Regret, maybe, or fear, or shame. She looked away. Judge Loretta Morrison entered, a black woman in her 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Bernard's opening statement was devastating, laying out the timeline of how Marcus had isolated Denise, stolen from her, systematically abused her for 3 years. The public defender's opening was weak, arguing that marriages are complicated and that Marcus believed he was entitled to use marital funds. Judge Morrison's expression made clear what she thought of that argument. Mrs. Washington testified first, describing years of witnessing Marcus yell at Denise, call her worthless, treat her like dirt. That man threw her out in a storm while she was 8 months pregnant, Mrs. Washington said firmly. I know abuse when I see it. And that was abuse. Financial experts walked through the fraud, showing forged signatures and systematically drained accounts. Marcus had stolen $67,000 over 2 years, including charges at jewelry stores and restaurants for other women on days when he was supposedly at work. Then came Denise's turn on the witness stand. Bernard walked her through the 3 years of marriage, gently but thoroughly, the slow isolation, the verbal abuse, the controlling behavior, Marcus checking her phone and email and telling her how to dress and who to talk to. When did you learn about the financial fraud? Bernard asked. The night my uncle found me. His security team discovered what Marcus had been doing. Denise's voice shook. I felt stupid, used, like everything about our marriage was a lie. Bernard let that hang in the air before asking about the night of the incident. Denise described the burnt rice, Marcus's rage fueled by whiskey, the accusations being thrown out in the rain while 8 months pregnant. He said I was nothing, she finished, tears streaming down her face, that I'd always be nothing, that I came from nothing and would die as nothing. It made me feel like maybe he was right, like maybe I really was worthless. Bernard's voice was gentle. But you're not nothing, are you? Denise lifted her head. No, I'm not. The public defender tried to shake her on cross-examination, suggesting she'd manipulated Marcus, that she'd hidden her family to seem vulnerable. Why didn't you tell your husband about your uncle? He demanded. Denise's answer was simple and honest. Because I was ashamed. I ran from my uncle 3 years before I even met Marcus. I convinced myself I wasn't good enough for that family, that I didn't deserve them. It had nothing to do with Marcus. Diana Price, Terrence's head of security and former FBI agent, destroyed what was left of Marcus's defense with cold, hard evidence. She walked the court through 22 years of searching for Denise, the surveillance they'd set up 6 months ago, with Mrs. Washington's cooperation, and what they'd found. Mr. Thompson was terminated from his position 4 months ago due to sexual harassment complaints, but he continued leaving the house every day, presumably letting his wife believe he still had a job, Diana testified, pulling up documentation on the courtroom screens. We documented the systematic draining of Ms. Miller's accounts. Over $67,000 stolen over a 2-year period. Mr. Thompson also had active profiles on 3 dating sites, all listing him as single with no children. Some of these messages were sent while Ms. Miller was pregnant. The public defender tried to argue the surveillance was illegal, but Diana was ready. All cameras were positioned on Mrs. Washington's private property with her permission. We had no expectation of privacy for actions occurring in public view. Everything we recorded was legal. Bernard played the footage, Multiple angles showing Marcus throwing Denise's belongings in the rain. Audio of him screaming, "You're nothing." Images of Denise collapsed in the mud. Several jurors looked away. Judge Morrison's expression hardened to stone. The trial lasted 3 days with witnesses coming and going, but by the end, Marcus had no defense left. His friends tried to paint him as a good guy who'd made mistakes, but Bernard destroyed each one with evidence of lies and cover-ups. Bernard's closing argument was powerful and devastating. This case is about more than money. It's about power and control. It's about a man who saw a vulnerable woman and decided to exploit her. Marcus Thompson didn't love Denise Miller. He used her. He isolated her, abused her, stole from her, and then tried to throw her away like garbage when she'd served her purpose. But Denise Miller is not garbage. She's not nothing. She's a survivor. She's strong, and she deserves justice. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. When they returned, the forewoman's voice was clear and certain. In the matter of Miller versus Thompson, we find in favor of the plaintiff on all counts. We award the plaintiff full restitution of $67,000 plus interest. Additionally, we award $200,000 in damages for emotional distress. We recommend that the criminal complaints be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Marcus's head dropped into his hands while Terrence squeezed Denise's hand. Judge Morrison looked at the defense table with barely disguised contempt. "Mr. Thompson, I've been a judge for 27 years, and I have rarely seen someone so thoroughly destroy another person through systematic abuse. You are ordered to pay the judgment within 90 days. I'm also issuing a permanent restraining order. You are not to contact Ms. Miller directly or indirectly, and you are not to come within 500 feet of her person or residence." When Marcus's attorney tried to argue about parental rights, Judge Morrison shut him down immediately. Pending the outcome of criminal proceedings, Marcus Thompson's parental rights are terminated. He will not be listed on the birth certificate. He will have no custody, no visitation, no contact. 5 days after the trial, Denise went into labor at 3 in the morning. Terrence was there immediately, having insisted on staying in the room next to hers for the last week. The drive to the hospital was calm despite Denise's contractions, Terrence holding her hand the whole way. "You're going to be amazing," he said, "just like your mother was." Veronica stayed through all 14 hours of labor, coaching Denise through contractions while Terrence paced outside with Cameron and other family members who'd rushed to the hospital. At 5:47 that evening, Denise's daughter was born. 6 pounds, 8 ounces, perfect in every way. "What will you name her?" the nurse asked. Denise looked at the tiny, perfect face that looked nothing like Marcus and everything like hope. "Nicole," she said. "Nicole Rose Miller, after her grandmother's." Terrence cried when he held his grandniece for the first time. "She has Nicole's eyes," he whispered. The hospital room filled with family over the next few hours, all of them wanting to meet baby Nicole. Mrs. Washington showed up with a hand-knitted blanket. "Every baby needs something made with love," she said. That night, after everyone had left and baby Nicole was sleeping peacefully, Denise checked her phone and found one last message that had gotten through before she'd blocked everything. From Marcus, just 2 words. "I'm sorry." 2 words that came 2 years and $300,000 too late. Denise deleted it without responding because some apologies don't deserve acceptance. 6 months later, the DeWitt Foundation for Domestic Violence Survivors opened in Southwest Atlanta, not far from where Denise had grown up in foster care. The building housed a shelter, legal clinic, counseling services, and job training program. Everything a woman needed to leave an abusive situation and build a new life. Denise stood at the ribbon cutting with baby Nicole on her hip. surrounded by family and supporters and news cameras. "I started this foundation because I know what it's like to feel trapped," she told the crowd. "To believe you're nothing because someone spent years telling you that. But I also know what it's like to discover you were wrong, that you have value, that you deserve love and safety and respect. Every woman who comes through these doors will get the support I got: legal help, financial resources, a safe place to stay, counseling, job training, whatever it takes to help them see that they're not nothing, they're everything." The applause was thunderous, and Denise saw herself on the monitors looking confident and strong, nothing like the broken woman who'd knelt in the mud 6 months earlier. After the ceremony, Mrs. Washington pulled her aside. "Your mama would be so proud. You're doing what she would have done. You're both fighters." That evening at the house Denise had bought for herself and Nicole, in a good neighborhood with excellent schools, she put her daughter to bed and sat on the porch with tea. Her phone buzzed with a news alert. Marcus Thompson sentenced to 3 years for fraud and identity theft. She read about the guilty plea, the restitution ordered, the mugshot that looked nothing like the confident man who'd thrown her out in the rain. Denise felt nothing, not satisfaction, not anger, just nothing. He was in her past now, a chapter closed. Her future was inside, sleeping peacefully in a crib surrounded by stuffed animals and family photos. 1 year after that night in the rain, Denise sat in her office at the foundation reviewing quarterly reports with Terrence. "We helped 83 women last quarter. 12 of them have already found jobs and moved into their own places. 23 are in legal proceedings to leave their abusers. All of them are safe." Terrence smiled with pride. "You're doing incredible work." Denise shook her head. "We're doing incredible work. None of this would exist without you." Terrence's response was simple and true. "It exists because of you. I just provided the resources. You provided the vision." Nicole, almost walking now, toddled around the office, babbling in her own language, looking more like Denise every day with none of Marcus visible in her features. "I got another letter from him," Denise said quietly. "From prison. Saying he's sorry, he's changed. He wants to be part of Nicole's life." Terrence waited for her decision. "What are you going to do?" Denise had thought about this carefully. "Nothing. He made his choice. I made mine. Maybe someday, when Nicole's older, if she wants to know about her biological father, I'll tell her the truth, but I won't force a relationship he hasn't earned." She looked at her uncle, the man who'd knelt in the mud for her, who'd given her a second chance at family, who'd helped her build something meaningful from wreckage. "Can I ask you something? Why did you keep looking for me? 22 years is a long time. Most people would have given up." Terrence's smile was warm and certain. "Because family doesn't give up. Your mother died believing you'd be loved and cared for. When I found out you'd been lost in the system, I made a promise to her memory that I'd find you. That took longer than I wanted, but I never stopped trying." That night, Denise tucked Nicole into bed and read her favorite story about a princess who saved herself. "You don't need a prince," Denise told her sleeping daughter. "You just need to know you're worth saving, and you are. You always will be." Outside, rain began to fall, but Denise wasn't scared of rain anymore. Rain had brought her uncle to her. Rain had washed away her old life. Rain had given her a chance to start over. She stood at the window with the baby monitor in hand and watched the storm. Marcus had called her nothing, but nothing couldn't build a foundation that helped dozens of women every month. Nothing couldn't love this fiercely or fight this hard or transform pain into purpose. She was everything, and she always had been. She just needed a Bentley in the rain to remind her. The foundation would help thousands of women over the years. Some would arrive broken like Denise had been, convinced they deserved the abuse. believing the lies their abusers had planted in their minds. But they'd leave knowing the truth, that their worth wasn't determined by how others treated them, that they had value simply because they existed, that they deserved safety and love and respect. Denise would tell each one the same thing. You are not nothing. You are everything. And there's a whole world waiting to remind you of that truth if you're brave enough to step into it. Marcus learned the hard way that you never know who someone really is or who loves them. Denise wasn't nothing. She was everything, and she always had been. If this story moved you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear that their worth isn't determined by how others treat them. Subscribe for more true stories of justice and redemption. And remember, karma doesn't forget, and neither does a billionaire uncle with security cameras. Drop a comment telling us what you would have said to Marcus in that courtroom. We'll see you in the next one.